The non-passage of the anti-money laundering bill has placed Guyana in a situation that can create severe repercussions for citizens and companies that conduct business overseas. Government sincerely hopes to avoid international sanctions, and efforts will be made to do this at the plenary meeting of the Caribbean Action Task Force on May 27 in Nicaragua.
I'm going to tell them that we have been unable to effect the recommendations which they have made, and I will outline the reasons why we have been unable to do so. I will, of course, exonerate the government from blame. But as I said, it's not about the government. It is Guyana that is under review. It's not the government of Guyana that is under review. So while the government may be exonerated from any form of blame, Guyana as a country may be condemned. And that is not the fault or the doing of this government, of which I am part.
He noted, however, that it is Guyana that is under review and not the government. While the government may be exonerated, it is Guyana that will take the blame. The minister was referring to the actions taken by the parliamentary opposition against the bill.
There is no legislation in CARICOM. We have no obligation in CARICOM to implement this so-called environmental tax. Okay? It is not an environmental tax, first of all, and secondly, there is no obligation to implement it in the manner that the minister suggests.
In a final bid to convince the opposition of the necessity for the bill to be passed and its importance to Guyana, President Donald Ramotar, in a letter to the National Assembly, appealed to the opposition to put Guyana first. The letter was read to the House by Prime Minister and Leader of the House, Samuel Hines.
I am calling on the parliamentary political parties and their representatives in the Parliamentary Special Select Committee on the Anti-Money Laundering and Countering the Financing of Terrorism Amendment Bill number 12 of 2013 to do all that is possible to complete its review on this bill and return it to the House expeditiously.
In the letter, the head of state also reminded of the experiences of one neighboring country whose status was downgraded twice in the same review process and of the dire impacts that country was faced with.
As Guyanese and as political leaders, we have a moral responsibility to support Guyana's compliance with these obligations, and the passage of the AMLFT Amendment Bill will bring Guyana in compliance with over 90% of the CFATF ICRG recommendations. Guyana's destiny is in your hands. I anticipate that as Guyanese first and leaders of our political parties, we shall not be found wanting. The Guyanese people are watching and trusting that members of Parliament will stand for our country first.
However, the call to move an amendment to the standing orders of the National Assembly and have the House address the bill as a matter of urgent public importance was unsuccessful.
I have looked at Standing Order 12, which is the standing order that the Honorable Prime Minister is seeking to invoke. I have looked at the ruling of former Speaker, the Honorable Harry N. Ramkaran, SCMP, dated the 15th of March 2004. And I am of the view, and it is my ruling, that the matter contained in the letter addressed to me by the Honorable Prime Minister does not meet the requirements of Standing Order 12. I rule that the matter does not qualify as a definite matter of urgent public importance.
The parliamentary opposition maintained their position that the bill would be considered by Select Committee and presented a rather long list of requested documents and public submissions. These were all granted. But the single request by government for daily sit-ins was ignored. This resulted in the stipulated task force deadline being missed, despite the fact that the task force itself, as well as the diplomatic community, had explained to the opposition reasons for the bill's passage.
The effect is that Guyana will be unable to effect the recommendations made by the CFATF before the CFATF's plenary, which will take place on the 26th to the 30th of May 2013 in Nicaragua, at which forum Guyana will be evaluated to determine its compliance with certain key and core recommendations made by the CFATF. It has been argued that this bill and Guyana's obligation came as a surprise to many, but this is an inaccuracy. This monitoring process is an ongoing exercise, and Guyana has been submitting reports at the requisite periodic intervals. These reports are all published on the CFATF website. The recommendations which were made were done so over a period of time, and all the recommendations did not come at once. Indeed, over 90% of those recommendations consisted of minor legislative changes, and it was agreed that those changes will be chronicled in a singular compendium which will be presented to this House in a singular amendment, and that is the bill which was presented. If this eventuality occurs, Guyana would be placed on a list of jurisdictions deemed as non-cooperating and insufficiently compliant with FATF recommendations, and member states will be called upon to apply countermeasures when dealing with that jurisdiction. Additionally, non-cooperating members will be placed under FATF administration and will have to report semi-annually in Paris, France, at considerable cost to the country.
Nevertheless, despite conceding the importance of the bill to Guyana, the AFC and APNU remain adamant that opposition bills must be passed before government bills can be too. As this status quo is maintained, Guyana's deadline for complying with international obligations will pass because the passage of the bill has not yet been approved. Failure to comply with the task force recommendations will see Guyana placed on a list of jurisdictions deemed to be non-cooperating and insufficiently compliant with recommendations, and member states will be called upon to apply countermeasures when dealing with that jurisdiction. Additionally, non-cooperating members will be placed under the task force administration and will have to report semi-annually to Paris and France at considerable cost to the country.